Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Allie's Book Nook. Today I'm going to share with you all of the books that I got through in the month of November. And I also am going to start with a special story about getting to meet my favorite author in November. So November, as far as reading goes, I had some great reads. I had some 5 stars, and then I had some really bad reads. I actually DNF'd one book, which I never do. But I also had a highlight, which is I got to meet one of my favorite authors, Noelle W Ihli. So I'm going to share that story with you guys, and then we can talk about that. Kind of goes into some of her books that I read. So Noelle W Ihli is one of my favorite authors. One of my favorite books is Ask for Andrea, and this book was tied for top book of the year for me for 2024 with No Exit by Taylor Adams. So she has been on a book tour, or she was on a book tour, to promote this new version of Ask for Andrea. And this is published by Kensington. So most of her books are self-published, and she teamed up with Kensington for this and a couple other books. And so it was a tour to promote this with the lovely sprayed edges, as well as the timing actually worked where her new book, the prequel to Ask for Andrea, was out. But technically the tour was to promote this. So she went to several different stops, and at each location, I think it was at each location, several locations, she would have another author there also promoting their book. So her last stop on her tour was in Idaho. It was in Hadley, Idaho, which is right by Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. She lives in Idaho, and so that was probably why she finished up her tour there. I think she lives in Boise, which is a bigger city, but this location that I went to see her is more northwest Idaho. It's a few hours from where I live, and I had been looking forward to this for months. So a little bit. First, let me show you the picture. This is myself and my husband. We got to meet her, and oh man, I was in such fangirl mode. It was awesome. So when we went to go see her, it's normally like a 3-hour drive, but we took a different route where it ended up being about 5 hours. And that was a perfect amount of time for us to listen to the audio of Ask for Andrea. I own the audio from when I listened to it a couple years ago. I had it on my Audible, and my husband is not a reader. Let me just say that. And he actually really enjoyed this book. This was probably his first audiobook that he sat and listened to the whole thing. And it is a thriller. I will talk more about it when I review it here. But it was a perfect amount of time where so they were actually going to have the event at a local bookstore, the Well Read Moose in Coeur d'Alene, but they ran out of room, and so they moved it to the Hayden Library. When we got there, we were a little bit early, so we got front row seats, and then we were able to finish it up like the last 15 minutes, and I was able to read along while I did. Finished up the audio. But anyway, I'm getting flustered just talking about it because it was so cool. She is such a nice person and very interesting. So as I said, her books are thriller, what's the word? Survival thriller, a lot of them are. And a lot of them are based on true stories. So this book, Ask for Andrea, she was loosely inspired by the victims of Ted Bundy. She watched a documentary about that or maybe listened to a podcast, and it inspired her to write the story from the victim's perspective. But some of her other books are based on true stories as well. One of these other books I'm going to talk about that I recently read, and not all of them, but yeah, most of them are based on true events. Last month I talked about Such Quiet Girls, which was another book of hers I read, 5 stars, amazing. That's based on a true event. So her books, I did notice that they had some Easter eggs in them, like Such Quiet Girls. So I did get to ask her about that in the Q&A, and she said yes, they do. She also said that she has a new book coming out next July, and it is a survival thriller regarding a plot of people being on a river rafting trip gone bad. So that sounds really good. And she said that's going to have some Easter eggs in it too. So she was actually there promoting her book with another author who had a debut novel. She's from Seattle. Her name is Molly Sullivan. Molly O'Sullivan. And so Molly O'Sullivan was like asking Noelle questions for most of the event, and then they had a meet and greet at the end. So because we were sitting in the front row, that pretty much put us last in line for the meet and greet, which was on the other side of the room, but that was totally fine. And we went up and we got to meet her, and we got to have, you could have 2 autographs per person. So I had brought all my books with me of hers. I don't have that many, but I had the one I purchased there, the Ask for Andrea, and then Gray After Dark, Run on Red, and Such Quiet Girls. So I gave 2 to my husband to have her sign and 2 for me. And one of the ones for my husband, she said, thank you for reading. And we kind of got a good laugh out of that because he's not a reader. But my Ask for Andrea book, which I just love this. It's so pretty. But this is the icing on the cake. She wrote in here, "For Allison, thank you for driving so far to meet me." So it's kind of a personalized autograph. It wasn't just her signature. So that was really cool. And yeah, she's awesome. She's really interactive on Facebook with her fans, and I just love her. Yeah, she's definitely one of my favorite authors. So to get to meet her was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. So anyway, again, this is us meeting her. And let's talk about the books. Okay, we're going to start a little bit out of order with how I finished them, because we're going to talk about the Noelle Ihli books first. So as I said, Ask for Andrea is a book that we primarily listened to the audio, but I did read along with the last few pages in here. Let me see here. So this is actually on Goodreads labeled Ask for Andrea #1. And the prequel to this that's out now is called Forget You Saw Her. And it's kind of the story behind Andrea, because she got a lot of questions. Who is Andrea? What's her backstory? When this came out. And so that's what the prequel is about. It's on the top of my Christmas wish list. I hope I get it. Anyway, I read this, as I said, a little bit in paperback, but primarily in audio. And this is the newest published version by Kensington. Dead Women Don't Forget. But most of her books are self-published. So this is a thriller, and it was published in 2022. It's 254 pages, or it was 7 hours long at 1.0 speed. But like I said, we finished it in 5 hours. I think we did like 1.5 speed. When I bought this on Audible a couple years ago, it was $14, but I did buy this paperback for $22 at the Well Read Moose event, and they donated a portion of the book sales to the library that hosted them, so that was pretty cool. Okay, so the synopsis on this book, first of all, this was a 5-star read for sure, if you couldn't tell for me. It's a really unique perspective. So it is told, it's basically like a ghost story, but it's not horror, it's not scary. It is told from the perspective of 3 unalived victims of this serial killer. So they are ghosts that have been killed by him, and so it says, in a hauntingly unique and compulsively readable psychological thriller, 3 women murdered by the same man unite in an afterlife to find comfort, solidarity, and justice that transcends death. So that's something that they have in common, is they were all killed by the same man, and he was basically someone that would go into this online dating site, and that's how he met his victims, and then he would unalive them. He also has a family and the facade of a normal life. And so it's about these victims that, they become ghosts at different times over like a few year span. And one of them is like with him from the beginning of the story and moves around with him and sees him doing these crimes. But one thing I liked about the ghosts is they actually seemed more like realistic of what like spirits that are not at rest would be. Like they don't have all these powers where they can, do these things to him or whatever. For the most part, they're just kind of there, there is one that she's kind of good with technology and she does some stuff with that. But once they team up, they do get a little bit stronger, I guess. But yeah, I liked that it seemed more realistic, that they weren't like these creepy ghosts that can, go bump in the night. So like I said, they're not scary ghosts. It was really a beautiful, touching story. And there were parts listening to it where I was about to cry. And it takes a lot to make me cry for a book, but I was getting a little teary-eyed. I mean, she does such a great job of not only like keeping you on the edge of your seat with thrillers, but also like character development. And I really felt for these girls and was really angry at their killer. So yeah, this was really, really great. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. I think a lot of people have already read it out there. It's pretty popular the last couple of years, like Book Talk, that type of thing. But if you haven't read it, you are doing yourself a disservice. Get out there and read it. It is so good. And like I said, my husband is not a reader and he enjoyed it. And I said to him, was this, I know it started out kind of slow, but then it got really good. And he goes, what do you mean? Someone got killed in the first chapter. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I read too many thrillers, but that's not really a spoiler. Because like I said, it happens in the first chapter to explain how they become these ghosts. And that's all on the back too. That's not giving anything away really, but yeah. Oh man, this is such a good book. And yeah, the last third of it will have you on the edge of your seat, like so intense. So beautiful story, beautiful addition. Yes. Okay. So I gave that 5 stars across the board for character, plot, story, readability, overall rating. I said this was so good. It was the second time that I've listened to it in about a year and a half. Very well written, emotional, sad, a unique perspective with the ghosts. And like I said, at the event, she said she was inspired by Ted Bundy's victims. And now I want to read all her books. There's, I think maybe 3 or 4 that I haven't read. And I really want to. It was really lovely to meet her and talk to her, and yeah, great experience. So the other book I read of hers, which I started like a little bit before we went in anticipation of meeting her, is Run on Red. This is one of her earlier books. So, and she did sign this one for Brian. That's my husband. A little bit more generic of a signature. I will show you the other signed copies that we have in my book haul, my November book haul video. But let's go back here a little bit in my little book journal here. Run on Red. So I read this just in paperback. I didn't do any kind of audio or anything like that. Again, by Noelle W Ihli. This was published by Dynamite Books, which is her publishing company, I believe. It's a thriller. It was published in 2022. 282 pages. And I got this for $7.50 at my local bookstore. I started it on November 2nd and I finished it on November 6th. And that was just like reading the paperback at night. Like it was a very quick, intense read. Side note, so I don't forget to tell you, she does have her own website where you can buy books of hers for pretty reasonable, including signed copies and even personalized signed copies. So like, I think it's like $22 for a signed copy book of hers through her website / Etsy link. And, I mean, that's like bookstore prices. So I think that's where I want to get None Left to Tell. None Left to Tell sounds like it holds a very dear place in her heart. And I want to get the signed copy from her site. But anyway, so this was another 5-star read. So this is actually based on an experience that she had. So in this book, it takes place early 2000s. Cell phones aren't that great. You know, there's these 2 college-age girls that are going, it takes place in Idaho. A lot of her books take place in Idaho, including part of Ask for Andrea. But they're in Idaho, and they are going to go to this college bonfire party. So kind of a rural area where there's no cell phone service, not very much traffic on the road. As they're driving to the bonfire, these two girls, a truck is aggressively pursuing them and trying to run them off the road. And there's two men in this truck. And so it says, as their situation grows more perilous, the girls realize the real terror has only just begun. But it won't be enough to keep them from fleeing from their, but it won't be enough to flee from their pursuers. If they're going to make it home alive, they'll have to fight. So this actually happened to Noelle, not to the extreme that it happened in the book, but she took her real life experience and said to herself, what is the worst possible situation that could have come out of this? So in the book, these two girls, they are being pursued by these guys in a truck that have, trying to run them off the road, trying to block them in the road, and they have hoodies pulled up over their faces. And all of that actually happened to her when she was younger, like early 2000s. And so that's really scary. So she took that and based it, used it as a starting point for this book. And then, as I said, she imagined what is a worst case scenario that could have happened there. And I asked her about it. I said, what if these guys read your book and like recognized the story? And she like kind of laughed and she's like, something tells me they're not big readers. But yeah, really intense, heart pounding, like, yeah. I said, so I gave it 5 stars all across the board. Characters, plot, story, readability, overall rating. Said it was another 5-star read from her. Very tense, fast paced, short chapters. I did not want to put it down. So it takes place in 2006 in outside of the Boise area, but like more rural area of Idaho. And there is a couple, so in here they talk about a place called the Pie Hole Pizza Place, and I think one of them works there, and that is brought up again in Such Quiet Girls. There's something that happens, just a little part of the story with the Pie Hole Pizza Place, so that was an Easter egg for something in this book, and she did confirm that. Well, she confirmed another Easter egg in Such Quiet Girls of the Thicket, which is her first debut novel. I haven't read it, but I did recognize that Easter egg, and yeah, she confirmed that. Anyway, I'm rambling. This is a great book. It's 5-star read. I don't know which one I like more. They're both really, really good books. You can't go wrong with either. I'd say Ask for Andrea is maybe a little bit more of a unique way to tell the story with the ghosts, but this one's really cool because it's based on something that she actually experienced in real life. So yes, really enjoyed Run on Red. Highly recommend it. Okay, so that is my, now that we're almost 20 minutes in, I'm sorry, that's my whole Noelle Ihli experience for the month, and it was amazing. So I read 11 books this month and 1 DNF, and the first book that I actually finished this month, last month, November, I almost should have DNF'd, but I didn't. And that was, I don't have a physical copy here with me. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. But it was called The Ministry of Time. I read it in hardcover, and I checked it out from the library. It was a 14-day checkout. Our local librarian, who is a wonderful person, recently retired. So my kids and I went in there to give her flowers, give her dog a bone, because we know them, we love them when we go to the library. And while we were there, she recommended this book. And she said, I haven't read it, but it's really popular. So I thought I'd give it a try. It sounded interesting when you read about it. It's by Kayleen Bradley. I would call it maybe like a sci-fi multi-genre kind of book. It was just published in 2024, and I read it from 10/20 to 11/2. Took me a little longer because I only read the physical, and like I said, I kind of struggled with it. So it was an interesting premise, but it just fell kind of short for me. Overall, I gave it a 2.25 rating. So the premise is in Great Britain, the government they make a new branch called the Ministry of Time because they found a way, basically with time travel, to do time travel where they can bring people from different eras to the present. And then they are basically given handlers to work with these. I think there's 5 time travelers from different eras, and see how they can adapt to living in the present and if there's any physical or emotional effects. And so this is about one gal who works for the government, and she gets a guy from Graham Core was his name, and he's a real historical figure, and he I think he was from the 1800s. So in this story, he which also in real life, his crew of explorers, they basically went on a botched mission to the Antarctic, and none of them survived. But in this book, the government comes and basically extracts him from there, brings him to the future, and it also has kind of a love story between her and him. So I was like, that sounds really cool. But yeah, it just kind of fell short. It was drawn out. I almost DNF'd it. But I did pull through. So like I said, Graham Core, he was a real historical figure. That whole situation really happened. A lot of people died, like 120 people or something, over the course of a couple years because their ships were iced in. It was, they couldn't, they docked, the ice went in the bay, whatever, and didn't melt, and they couldn't get out. Some of them tried to walk their way out, didn't make it. There's rumors of cannibalism that occurred in real life and in the book. That was actually the most interesting part when I Googled that. But the book itself, I didn't really like it. I didn't find that it was worth the hype. It had a lot of hype from like Good Morning America, hyped it up. Barack Obama, which this is the second book that I've read that he said was really good, that I think we are very different people, and he's a lot smarter than me, and we have very different tastes in books. So anyway, I really wanted to like it, but I didn't like it that much. I actually wouldn't recommend this. It had that dry British humor, which at first was kind of fun, but then it just got a little bit redundant. So 2.25 overall, characters 2.25, plot story 2.5, readability 2, and overall, like I said, 2.25. So yeah, that was the lowest rating book that I finished this month. Okay. The next book that we have to talk about is Iron Flame. This is from the Fourth Wing series, or as I call it, the Empyrean series. This is the second book. There are 3 books, and I'll talk a little bit about the third one here in a minute, but I gave this a 3.75, and I actually wouldn't have rated it that high except there was a cliffhanger at the end that really grabbed me. But hardcover, so this is not the copy I read. The copy I read was a hardcover that my neighbor lent me, so it was free, and it had black sprayed edges, which was cool. But since then, or during that time, whatever, I actually found this at a local thrift store, and it was like 4 books for $1. And so I got this, and then a couple books for my kids. This is by Rebecca Yarros, published by Red Tower Books. It's a romantasy book published in 2023. 623 pages, so it is a chunk, and it's 28 hours on audio. So I did also listen to it on audio. I actually purchased it on Audible for $14.95. Yeah. And about $1 used. So I started reading this on October 26th, and I finished it on November 10th. And this story basically continues where the first book left off. I have to say, I don't think that this is really the series for me. I don't read a lot of fantasy or romantasy. And so I don't think it was really the series for me, but the first book ended on a big cliffhanger. So this picks up right where that left off, but this one was more drawn out, and it made it harder to connect with the characters. because there was that big cliffhanger at the end, I felt obligated to start the third, which is Onyx Storm. I did like the black sprayed edges at that copy I had, but I think Akator, Court of Thorns and Roses was much better. I liked the writing a lot better, and yeah, it was a bigger series, but I liked it more. So this book had spice, action, more story / character development, but it definitely could have been shorter. 3.75 overall. Characters were 3.5. Plot story 3.75. Readability 3.25. And then, yeah, overall rating 3.75. So that leads me into my next book I'm going to talk about, which is not necessarily the order that I read these in, but I'm just going to talk about it right now. And that is the third book in this series, Onyx Storm. Now, I don't have that with me here because I chucked it out from the library and I already returned it. But that's the third book in the Empyrean series. I read it in hardcover and also for free from the library, and also through audio through Libby. So that was free through my library too. And I'm glad it was free because I'm just going to tell you guys I DNF'd it. And it takes a lot for me to DNF a book. And I was really hesitant, but I just wasn't enjoying it at the time. And it was actually really empowering to do that. It felt really good once I made that decision that, I'm an adult. I am not in school being forced to read certain curriculum. I can read what I want to read. And I have so many books that I want to read that life is too short to just suffer through a big book like that. Will I ever pick it back up? Maybe. Although I did Google the end, and I probably shouldn't have done that. But it looks like it does end on another big cliffhanger. So I'm thinking she'll probably write a fourth book. Anyway, this is Rebecca Yarros, Red Tower Books, 2025 published. So early this year it came out. January, I want to say. It was a romantasy book, 527 pages and 24 hours in Libby. So, did I write down? Yeah, I wrote down where I DNF'd it. I started it on 11/10 and I DNF'd it 2 days later on 11/12 at page 90. So I was 18% in to the book. I feel like that was giving it a fair chance. And I don't know. I think a big part of it was I just needed a break from that fantasy. To me, I would call it heavy fantasy. A lot of people wouldn't consider it heavy, but to me it was. I just needed a break from this series. I was starting to get bored and honestly a little bit annoyed with the characters. And I felt like I was at risk of it putting me in a reading slump, and I didn't want that to happen. The last time I went into a reading slump, it was a really bad one, and it lasted years, and it was because I tried to force myself through the whole Outlander series. So, I have a couple up there. I think I'm gonna probably unhaul that series. Anyway, I did Google the ending. It left it open for another book, but some of it was just confusing, and it wasn't just me. I read the same thing in reviews where she would introduce there'd be characters that just were never in the other books, or places that were never mentioned in the other books or on the maps that were just brought into the story we were already supposed to know everything about them. And I didn't really like that. Yeah, new characters show up without a pretense. It was confusing. And I said I might pick it up later, but probably not. But I really liked the first one and the second one. The first one was the best. Second one wasn't bad. And then I just wasn't feeling it. But I'm grateful that I gave it a try, and to my friend that let me borrow them. Thank you. But yeah, just no. Also, it did have a fair amount of spice. So if you're not into spice, then don't pick it up. If you don't like books about dragons, it was fine, but I don't know. I'm a thriller girly at heart, and so I think if I would have taken more of a break before jumping into this, I might have enjoyed it more. But at this time in my life, I just DNF'd it. Maybe a soft DNF, I don't know. But like I said, once I did that, it felt good. It was kind of empowering to say, okay, I can set this down, and I don't have to force myself through 24 hours of this book. So anyway, that was my only DNF this month, and that was Onyx Storm. second DNF of the year, actually. So let's go back here a little bit. So now the rest of the books I have here, I did finish. And the next one is When He Was Wicked. And this is a Bridgerton book. It's the 6th out of 8 books in the series. And this is Francesca's story. So I did this. Actually, I have this. I'm trying to get through all 8 of these eventually. But I only read the audio. I only listened to the audio because it was a quick read. Julia Quinn wrote this. It's published by Avon Books. It's a historical romance. And it's published in 2004. I paid $30 for the set of 8 of these about a year ago, and the audio was free on Libby. I started it on October 28th, and I finished listening to it on 11/4. So I gave this a 3 overall. It is the spiciest in the series so far. There was a lot of it, and I didn't feel like it had much of a plot though aside from that. So it was okay, but it was kind of drawn out, and I think I'm going to take a break from the series for a while. I actually listened to this, I think, in between the 2 Fourth Wing books. Maybe that was also part of my problem, where I felt like I was in danger of going into a reading slump. But the tension on this was pretty low. There is a character in here that has malaria, and there was an author's note about it. And about aneurysms at the end. And that was kind of interesting, her research she did on those medical issues. But yeah, I don't know. 3 overall for also for character, plot, story, and then readability. I did give it a 3.5. These books are kind of popcorny, you know, they're not a lot of depth to them, but they're easy to get through. So after that, I was just like ready for something good. And I did have, my next book was a 5-star read, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me here. But it was Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. So I read that primarily in hardcover. My friend let me borrow it. But I also listened to it a little bit on audio through YouTube. I didn't know that you can listen to audio on YouTube, but there is a lot out there. It was kind of, it wasn't as nice as like an actual audiobook app because it didn't have the chapters broken down. It was just one long, like 2-hour YouTube video. But yeah, I think that's a good option to have out there now if you haven't looked into that. It helped me finish up the book pretty quickly. So Alice Feeney wrote the book, like I said, published by Flatiron Books in 2024. It's a thriller, 306 pages or 9.5 hours on audio. And it was free through the different methods that I used to listen to it or read it. I started it on November 11th and I finished it on November 17th. So as a review for this, so basically it's about this writer, and it takes place, he's British, and his wife, one day, at the beginning of the book, she basically is on the phone with him coming home, and she says, oh, there's a lady in the middle of the road. I'm going to get out and help her. And he's like, no, don't do it. And she does. And she disappears. They find her coat, but that's it. She's gone. So he basically gets in a bad place with that. And his, editor, who is it? It's someone in the book world that he has connections with, his agent. She was actually the godmother of his wife who's disappeared. And she says, I actually have access to this cabin on this remote Scottish island. Why don't you go there? This is like a year later. Why don't you go there and try to write another book and get your life together where you don't have any distractions? So him and his dog go there, and all these things on the island just are weird, and there's something not right. And you start to wonder, is it paranormal? Is it just that they're weird because there's like 20 something people that live on this whole island and they're so isolated? Like, what is going on? And as he's there, the longer he's there, the weirder stuff gets. And that's about all I can say. It was a little bit of a slow burn at first, but the ending was like, wow. It like blew me out of the water, completely took me by surprise, and I really liked it. I think this is probably my favorite Alice Feeney book out of the 3 that I've read. They've all had good plot twists, but this one, I really, really liked the ending of it. So I gave it a 5 stars. At first I was going to say 4.75, but I bumped it up to a 5. I said that it's creepy. You don't know if it's paranormal or what. The narrator is kind of unreliable. He's an alcoholic. And I really love the twist at the ending. I would recommend it. One thing that I would note is the chapters are not numbered, so it would be kind of slightly harder to read it in tandem with a traditional audiobook. High tension, especially the last like third of the book, maybe quarter of the book. So in the audio that I listened to on YouTube, I think it was the same male narrator that was in Rock Paper Scissors of hers, which I really liked. But I liked some of the sound effects in it, which was like there was like waves, and like when they talk on the walkie-talkie, it was a walkie-talkie sound. And the beginning of the book has a map of the island, which does add to the story. I always love a good map in a story. And it had short chapters. And just throughout the book, you're like, what is really going on here? So I liked that a lot. Characters, I gave a 5. Plot story, 5. Readability, 4.75. And overall, a 5. So I would recommend that book. I think the rest of the books, well, no. Most of them I have physical copies here, so I'm sorry about that. But this next one I do. I really enjoyed this next book here, and this is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. And I gave this a 4.75, and that was only because there was a couple point of views that were alternating, and it was kind of confusing on whose story you were following at times. Otherwise, it would have been a 5. But I really enjoyed this. So, read this in paperback as well as listened to it on audio, and that was through Libby. So this is Simone St. James book published by Berkeley Penguin Random House. It's a horror / thriller. Publishing date, I didn't write that down, but we can look here really quick. 2020. And it's 343 pages or 11 hours on audio. I paid $10.99 on Amazon for the book, and then, like I said, it was free through Libby. This is one of the books that I got for my birthday when my mother-in-law sent me $75, and I got a bunch of books when Amazon was having their big day sale. This was one of the pricier ones, but it was worth it. I started it on November 13th, and I finished it on November 15th. So let me just read you the very high-level synopsis. Something hasn't been right at the roadside Sundown Motel for a very long time, and Carly Kirk is about to find out why in this chilling New York Times best-selling novel from the author of The Broken Girls. So it has alternating timelines. Basically, modern day, this girl, Carly Kirk, her aunt had worked at this Sundown Motel in the 80s and had disappeared. And at that time, the motel was already run down. So Carly comes back, present day, 2020, decides she's going to take a job as a front desk clerk there, just like her aunt had, and try to find out some answers to what happened. And by this time, it's really like dilapidated. Like it's really not the nicest place. But as she's trying to find out answers, there is some creepy stuff that's going on. And paranormal stuff. That's why this is classified as a horror book. But there are thriller, detective kind of plot lines in this book. But it was really good. She goes on this quest and ends up getting more than she expected. So I liked this book a lot. Like I said, the only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is the plot line. It was kind of confusing at times with the multiple POVs. her aunt in the 80s, and then her in present day. And then it had short chapters, but again, they weren't numbered. So I wasn't really a fan of that. It was fast-paced, engaging. It reminded me a bit of Ask for Andrea. Not really, but it was more creepy. And more of a paranormal aspect. So this was my first Simone St. James book. I would recommend it. And I do want to read more by her. 4.75 overall. Same for characters and readability. And then 5 stars for plot story. And 4.75 for overall. So yeah, that was a good book. I want to read more from her. Okay, so the next book that we have, I actually listened to a lot of audio that I don't have copies of this month, so I'm sorry. But it was called Nuclear War: A Scenario by Annie Jacobsen. And I listened to this on audio. And it was also narrated by the author Annie Jacobsen. It's history is technically a nonfiction book, but it reads kind of like a fiction book. And I typically don't like nonfiction, but I really liked this. I gave it a 4.75. It was published in 2024. It was 11 hours on audio, and it would have been 400 pages in the physical copy. I listened to it free through my Libby app through the library. I started it on November 17th, and I finished it on November 19th, so it only took me a couple days. I've heard good things about this book, particularly from Chris from Wax Books and Whimsy. She listened to it and she liked it so much that she bought the physical book. And so hearing her talk about it, I was like, okay, that convinced me to read it or listen to it. And I'm very glad I did. So it basically covers its nuclear war, a scenario. So how we could very feasibly get into a nuclear war in this day and age. But it covers the history of nuclear weapons leading up to now and kind of a what if scenario. And it's really not far-fetched at all. Like, it would be very easy for that to happen. And it makes you realize how close we are to potentially like an Armageddon situation. So it was both fascinating and terrifying. I'm so glad that I gave it a try. Like I said, it's not my go-to genre, but it's one of those books that will stick with you for a long time. And just when you hear about all this stuff that has happened in history, like, it's really crazy and is still like happening right now as we lead our normal lives. Or not happen. Well, you just have to read it. Okay. Or listen to it. I think listening to it was a good way to go. And like I said, it was narrated by the author. She did like years of research, and the first couple minutes of the audiobook is just her naming off all the people that she interviewed. So she did extensive research. This was only my second nonfiction book I read this year. The other one was like a self-help book. But man, this was so tense. The tension level was really high throughout the whole book. It was, yeah, crazy. So I give this a 4.75 overall for characters, readability, and overall. And then the plot story was a 5. So I would recommend that book, even if it's not something that you typically would be interested in. Just give it a try. It was really good. Okay, the next book we have is called Falling. And this is by T.J. Newman. So I got this book because I wanted to experience it while I was on a plane. And I was really hoping that it would be just like intense, a nail biter, and especially experiencing it in a plane environment. And I have to say, this was disappointing. This was a 2.5 star read. So I read this in hardcover as well as audiobook. I got it free through Libby, and so I was planning on just reading it, but then I also picked it up this month at a used bookstore for $4 for the hardback. I think it's only out in hardback. So I had this as well. Written by TJ Newman. It's a thriller slash suspense, published in 2021, 304 pages in 8 hours. And I started it on November 19th and I finished it on November 26th. So on the back it says, I'm not going to crash this plane and you're not going to kill my family. So the premise of this book is this pilot gets on a plane to fly commercial flight full of passengers, and his family is kidnapped. And the kidnapper says, you are going to crash this plane or I'm going to kill your family. And he's got a wife and 2 kids. And so that's how it starts out. And actually how it starts out is, I didn't like it. It was a cheap shot. The first chapter is he's on a plane. It's super, super, super gory scene. Super gory. But then you find out it was just a dream. And that's not really a spoiler because it was the first chapter. But I thought that was kind of like low-hanging fruit for that author to do that, to pull you in. But it was written by a gal who, this is her debut novel. She used to be an airline stewardess for 10 years, and she wrote this book on while she was like in her downtime on some of her flights, and it was rejected by like 41 publishers before it was finally published. And actually, not to be harsh, but I can kind of see why. It wasn't for me. Maybe if I was in the airline industry I might like it more, because there is a fair amount of like airline jargon in here, and I might be in the minority because I've heard a lot of people say that, they thought it was really intense and all this. I didn't. I thought it was kind of boring, actually. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel like it lived up to the hype for me personally. And it was just kind of corny how she used that gore in the beginning to try to pull people in. I did read it partially before I was on the plane, but also on the plane and after, and that didn't add to the thrill really at all. It was pretty low tension. I'm not going to be reading others by her. She has another one called Drowning, where a plane crashes in the ocean. And then another one that's similar, like airplane thriller, survivor kind of situation. I'm not going to read any more of those. They just weren't for me, even though I've heard good things about this. So you might like it. Like, don't discount it just because of my opinion. But personally, I was not a fan. 2.5 overall, 2 for characters, 2.5 for plot story, and then readability was 2.25. So not for me. Okay. So after that, on my flight home, because we went to visit family for Thanksgiving. So that was before the flight there and during the flight. On the flight home, I listened to a short novella audiobook, kind of the same premise of like a thriller that takes place on an airplane, and it was much better. And it was called Final Descent. And this is a short, well, I guess it's a novella that actually just came out this last month, November 2025. It's written by Audrey J. Cole and published by Rainier Publishing. I don't have the physical copy. I just listened to it through Audible. I paid $2.99 for it. It's a psychological thriller / suspense. It was only 2 hours and 21 minutes, but the physical copy would be 96 pages. So it's a quick read. 11:28 is when I started it, and I finished it the next day, 11:29. So this book was much better than Final Descent. It's about this gal that is a pilot, and she's recently divorced, single mom. She has went through some rough stuff lately, but she goes on a dating app, meets a guy, and then he's actually like creepy. So she tries to cut it off. He ends up basically stalking her, and then she gets on a flight as the pilot to go somewhere, and he shows up in a pilot uniform. And so that's not really giving anything away. That's kind of the synopsis of the book. But maybe I liked it because it had more of that like psychological thriller aspect to it. Maybe a little bit of domesticated thriller. Not as much, like the whole story didn't take place on the plane. And it had a she's a little bit of an unreliable narrator. So I liked those parts of it. It was a short story. And it was fun to listen to on the plane. I felt like the twist at the end was kind of far-fetched, but I did enjoy it for what it was. A lot of times with these short stories, you're not going to get as much meat with it, but I enjoyed it for what it was, and I liked the creepy stalker vibes in it. So this was my first Audrey J. Cole book. I do want to read or listen to more. She has one called Missing in Flight, and it's about, I want to read that one next time I go on an airplane. I guess I'm weird like that, but it's about this lady that her infant disappears mid-flight on the flight. So I'll probably try to do that my next trip in the sky. I gave Final Descent 3.5 stars overall, and for plot, story, and character, and then readability was a 4. It was a nice quick story, and that was kind of just what I needed because it was like an 1.5-hour flight. So I did listen to a little bit the day before and then finish it up on the flight, and it was great. Okay. I'm sorry we're almost an hour in, but thank you if you're still here. I'm going to talk about my last book of the month, which I guess it wasn't my favorite. I guess the Noelle Ihli books were my favorite, but this is a new to me author that I'm really enjoying, and that is Charlie Donnelly, and the book is Long Time Gone. So I have since read a second book of his, Those Empty Eyes, which I really enjoyed too, but I'll be talking about that next month for my December reading wrap up. But this book, Long Time Gone, was my first Charlie Donnelly book that I've read, and I really, really liked it. I gave it a 4.75, and I would have given it a 5-star rating, but there was a twist in it that was just a little too far-fetched where I couldn't give it a 5. But I thought this was such an interesting premise. Okay, so I read this in paperback. I also ended up reading primarily paperback, but a little bit of it as an ebook, and then the last couple hours of it I listened to in audio because I really just wanted to finish it, and it was really really gripping. So this is published by Kensington, same publisher that has teamed up for Ask for Andrea. This is it's a psychological suspense mystery book, published in 2024, 304 pages or 9.5 hours on audio. This is another one of those books that I got in that Amazon Big Deal sale for $8.46 new, and I paid $5 for it on Audible. I listened to it 11:17 to 11:29, listened and read. That's why it took me a little bit longer, because I mostly was just reading it like at night. But man, this was so good. And I love the premise of the story. It's unique. So the premise kind of reminded me a little bit of Face on the Milk Carton, if you guys remember that. So basically what this is about is there is a gal named Sloane Hastings, and she is in school to get her degree in, she wants to be like a medical examiner, but she has to take this class, or she has to do an assignment, I guess, about forensic genealogy, which is, where they use DNA of relatives to link perpetrators to a crime. And so we have seen this in real life with, there was a serial killer like recently in California, and they talk about him in here. And then even like the Idaho 4 killings, that's partially how they linked the killer to the crime, was through these genealogy websites. So say like, okay, so in this story, she has this project. So she's adopted, and she's never known her birth parents. She submits her DNA to one of these genealogy websites like Ancestry.com or, Family Tree one of those. And she finds out that she is linked to this family that disappeared. And not only that, she is one of the disappeared members. So when she was like an infant, her parents and her disappeared and no one's ever found them. Well, turns out she is still alive because she's an adult now, and she found that out through doing these DNA testing. So she basically is trying to find out the story behind that and her parents and everything. And now that she knows her true identity, she finds out that her parents were part of this affluent family that basically run this town in Nevada. And so she goes there, meets her family, and she finds out that this family is kind of corrupt and they have very deep ties in the town. And so they can make anything happen. And is that related to the disappearance of her parents and what happened to her parents? And how did she end up getting adopted out to her mom and dad? The lady that said that her parents thought was her mom wasn't. And just really kind of a weird situation. But it was really good. And it's also going back, alternating timelines between the present with this going on and then 1990s when she was a baby, and the whole situation when her family disappeared and the level of corruption of the family and the influence that they have on that town. And yeah, it was really good. I thought this was a unique storyline. It was really good, fast paced, very short chapters. And I love that because then it wants it makes you want to keep reading, So there's like, out of 400 pages, there is 77 chapters in here. So, if there's a chapter that's only a couple pages long, you're going to, one more chapter. And, I really like that. It had the dual timelines, which was an interesting part of the story. I did guess part of the ending. And like I said, the only reason I gave it 4.5 overall because there was a plot twist towards the end that was pretty far-fetched in my opinion. But characters were a 5, readability was a 5, and plot story and overall was 4.75. So this was my first Charlie Donnelly book. I said I wanted to read more, and in fact, as soon as I got done with this, I went and read Those Empty Eyes, and that was great. I'm going to talk about that next month, but that only took me a couple days too. I think I want to read his whole backlist at this point. So in this book, I kind of got the feeling that he doesn't like podcasters very much, these true crime podcasters. And one of the characters in this book is a true crime podcaster based out of Indianapolis. And that reminded me a lot of, I think that's where Ashley Flowers and the Crime Junkie podcast is from. So I don't know if that was like a jab at that, but I got the feeling that he doesn't really care for that type of media outlet, as well as like the armchair detectives. And I actually got that from the next book of his that I read too. But I've heard that his books have some Easter eggs in them, or like they're all standalones, but I think they're all standalones, but they have kind of in the same universe where there's overlapping characters. So I have heard that the medical examiner in this book, that is kind of the main character is a student under her, that she appears in other books. And actually she did she appear in this other book I read? No. I'm getting my lines crossed, but so that was kind of cool. So I think that other book I saw a couple Easter eggs too. Like I said, I really enjoyed this. 5 stars. I've read one of his other books, and I will be reading more of his books probably this month. I have one more on hand, but Santa might be bringing me a few more of his books after Black Friday. So yeah, really excited. Actually, I have 2 more of his books that I haven't read on hand. So that is the long-winded story of the 11 books that I read this month, as well as meeting with Noelle W Ihli. Super fun. I am going to be doing another video of my book haul for the month of November. I was pretty good in November, a lot better than October, but I also am going to be doing a video. I need to organize my library, and I'm going to be unhauling some books. So I'll share that with you guys when that happens. As far as reading this month, like I said, I finished a Charlie Donnelly book already for December. I'm currently reading In the Water by Catherine, can't think of her last name. That's, I think, a domestic thriller. And I actually plan on reading Count of Monte Cristo, hopefully. So I've read 84 books this year. My goal was 60, and so I've surpassed that. And so I think December is going to be lighter in terms of volume because Count of Monte Cristo is like, I don't know, 1,000 pages or something. It's going to be a big commitment, but I have the physical book. I read it like years ago and I loved it. I've read it like 3 times, but that was probably 20 years ago. So I'm going to reread it, and I'm going to listen to audio this time too, which I think the audio is like 40 something hours. It's pretty long. So I'll be reading that, and then I'm thinking I'll probably end the year somewhere around 90 books. But either way, I've surpassed my goal. It's been a great reading year. And so I think I'm going to do a video maybe in January or towards the end of December of my top reads for this month, this year. And maybe, so the first half of the year I did a yes, no, maybe video. I might do another one of those for the second half of the year. And yeah, this is definitely my smaller channel. I do have another channel called Allie's Amazing Scents where I talk about home fragrance. This is a newer, smaller channel, more of like an intimate setting. And I really appreciate all you guys that have tuned in and, commented and liked my videos, subscribed to my channel. It's a really cool community. So thank you so much. And I will catch you next in my November book haul video. Bye, guys.